Have you ever taken a stroll through a ghost town? A town in which many of its old historic buildings stand empty and abandoned? In this video, I'll walk you through the well-known ghost town of Antelope, Oregon, and show you many buildings constructed in the 1800s that still stand quiet and empty today. Welcome to Investigating the Northwest. This channel is dedicated to exploring the mysterious, haunted, and historical of the Pacific Northwest. This is a part of a series about ghost towns, which will allow us to take a step back in time and walk the streets to imagine life over 100 years ago. This weekend, we took the family on a tour of 3 well-known ghost towns located in Central Oregon. We visited Antelope, Shaniko, and Kent. You can read more about these towns in several books on ghost towns, but most notably, Ghost Towns of the Pacific Northwest by Philip Varney. These towns are located on a 23-mile stretch of Highway 97, about 90 miles from Bend, Oregon, and 150 miles from Portland, Oregon. At the end of the video, I'll talk a little bit more about how to get there if you'd like to visit. In Central Oregon, there are several clusters of ghost towns. Each cluster includes about 3 towns that are an easy drive from each other, and this is the first cluster we'll be exploring. We stopped in Antelope first. Antelope was founded in 1871 with the construction of its post office. Most all of these towns' official existence began with the construction of their post office. And none of these towns are completely empty and abandoned. Antelope has several residents living within its boundaries, although there are no stores, gas stations, or restaurants open and operational at this time. Antelope, with its population of about 140, contains only historic buildings and a few homes. So without further ado, let's take a tour of Antelope. This building here is one of the more iconic buildings. You'll see this in pictures in the books and many pictures on the internet. This, at one point, used to be a 76 gas station. Now, I'm sure that's not the original purpose of the building, but you can see the 76 on the left side of that building. Now, this is one of the few truly abandoned homes, and it really looks like a haunted house. But my kids were actually more interested in those enormous trees surrounding it, and they wanted to climb the trees. We parked near this spot and then started to walk down one of the main streets of Antelope. So here again we see the 76 station. And the white building that we're approaching is the Ancient Order of United Workmen Hall. So this is a 2-story building built in 1898. You can even see the date at the top of the building. This is one of the more well-kept and maintained buildings in Antelope. It's just a beautiful historical representation of what existed in the late 1800s here in Antelope. Then just past the United Workmen Hall are these little hose houses that must have been used by the fire departments when they needed to put out fire. There's a couple of these in the town. And now we head towards the post office. It's clear that this mobile trailer here is not the original post office that was built in 1871. However, I do believe that this abandoned building nearby could be the original post office. I did some research to verify, but couldn't confirm it for sure. But it does make sense that they would build the new post office by the location of the original spot. Now, Antelope, Oregon, it is also well known for being the home base of the Rajneesh community. And this was a cult that operated between 1981 and 1985. They built a compound nearby and renamed this town Rajneeshpuram. And during that 4 years, the community members, they committed many crimes. And it wasn't long before Rajneesh himself was arrested and deported. Then the compound was closed and the town reverted to its original name of Antelope. And then, of course, they had this really fun wagon that was still left in this field that my kids enjoyed exploring as well. We continue down this main street here, and on the left-hand side is the general store, restaurant, kind of catch-all building that functioned as its primary store. It's not operational right now. It's an empty building, but it still gives you the sense of the one store that was in this town. It's clearly a more modern building. It wasn't built in the late 1800s, though. Now I'm approaching one of the homes that is definitely occupied. There is a resident that lives here. If you're an urban explorer, there isn't going to be an opportunity to get into the abandoned places in this town, because this home here and many of the homes in the town had signs, "Smile, you're on camera." So these places are protected, they are cared for, they don't want people actually going into the buildings. Now we're approaching another one of the iconic buildings, one of the ones that has had a lot of pictures published when you Google search Antelope, and this is the Antelope School. This is a building that has been really well maintained. I have seen references that the town members still use it for meetings and events, but the whole area itself is fenced off. The playground looks in well-maintained condition. This is not rusty equipment. It does look like kids might actually play on it right now. And so while I could walk up, take video, and take pictures, the fence itself is locked shut. You can't actually go onto the property. Now, my husband had asked if we could actually visit the Rajneesh compound to see what it looked like today. However, even though this was the home base, the hometown of the Rajneesh community, their compound was actually 41 miles further into the east. It's also currently owned and operated by a Christian youth camp, so it's not close. It's still quite a drive, and even if you did go there, you wouldn't be able to see inside the compound. So here you see the playground equipment, good condition, the buildings in good condition. They're flying a flag out there. This building was built in 1925, so it wasn't one of the original buildings in the early 1800s town of Antelope. But it is still approaching 100 years old and is still a well-maintained and historic building. As you can see, the day was gorgeous and those clouds were so picturesque. It was just beautiful walking around this town. The residents were quiet. We didn't actually see anyone, nobody driving cars and nobody out and about, but some of the homes were clearly occupied, although this one itself is not. And of the few abandoned homes that there are, they are all fenced off. They do want people to keep off of the property and out of the buildings. So we respectfully looked at a distance and toured as quietly and as respectfully as we could. Now we're just walking south down the next block, and it takes us past a few occupied and a few unoccupied homes, some original sheds. And here we approach another one of the abandoned homes, and this one is not nearly as well kept as the others, even though the others are in quite a bit of disrepair as well. In this one, the windows are broken out. There's plywood instead of siding, but at least they are making an attempt to keep the elements out of the building. This one does not have a fence, but it also, most all of these buildings, as I said, have a smile, you're on camera sign. So people are very protective of the buildings in this town, even if no one is living in them. And then we arrive at the community church. And this is another gorgeous building built in 1897. It does look like this church may still be in use today because it's in really good condition and the ramps are well maintained, but I couldn't get a confirmation that there were active church services at the building. But it's just a beautiful, stunning building. And with the backdrop of these gorgeous clouds and the bright blue sky, it was just a pleasure to be looking at this building. And I'm so glad they've been taking care of this really beautiful building. And I hope they do still use it. I really do. And this is the final building that I'm highlighting in this tour of Antelope. It really is a short walk. It's down one block, go right past the school, and then come back down another block, and you can get back to your car where you've parked. Probably took us about 30 minutes to walk around and view the buildings, to enjoy the fresh air, and to get a nice good walk in. So now we're headed back to where we parked, and one of the buildings you see is the one that's right beside the post office. So we have made a loop through the town and we're headed back to our car so we can start our trip to the next destination. But do keep watching to the end because I'm going to tell you about how to get to the town if you want to visit, some tips if you're going to take this tour and go to the 3 towns. There are some things that you should keep in mind if you're going to make this trip. And I want you to be as prepared as possible so that you can enjoy this tour of the 3 ghost towns. If you're interested in visiting Antelope, Oregon, here's how you can get there. I've provided the specific coordinates if that's your preferred method. And here are the routes from some of the most common methods of getting there. This one is the easiest from Bend, Oregon to Antelope. It's simply straight north on Highway 97 until you veer left on 293, and that'll take you right to Antelope. From Portland, Oregon, there are a couple of routes you can take, and it's a little bit more complicated, but probably shouldn't take more than 3 hours to get there. The most important part of this tour is truly to be prepared. These towns are located a little further out and are much further away from gas stations, restaurants, and bathrooms. So definitely fill up your gas tank before you start your trip. Make sure to bring some snacks and drinks. And then also you may want to limit your bathroom breaks and the amount that you actually do drink because there aren't very many bathrooms. In fact, I believe there's only one bathroom in Shaniko that you can use while you're on this tour. If you're interested in taking this tour, make sure to stay tuned for the next part in which I show you through Shaniko, Oregon. Then part 3 will be Kent, Oregon, and then there'll be a bonus part 4 with the Kent Cemetery. Thank you so much for joining me on this tour of Ghost Town, Antelope, Oregon. If you're interested in learning about the mysteries of the Pacific Northwest, of exploring fascinating locations and discovering local legends, please do subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to receive an email when a new video is released.